Shuttl. Shuttl is a Splunk application to archive index data. Shuttle's two main use cases are for compliance and historical analysis. Shuttl can assist Splunk in pushing index data to an archive system like Hadoop, NFS, Amazon S3, or Amazon Glacier. It also can bring the data back in from that archive system into the third directory. And finally, Shuttl can assist in actually removing that third bucket and flush it out. However, when Shuttl remove that third buckets, it is not going to delete the data from the archive system. It simply remove it so that the Splunk search can no longer find that data. To set up Shuttl with Hadoop, we have to configure three files: archiver.xml, hdfs.properties, and indexes.conf. In the archiver.xml, we have the option of selecting the back-end storage like Hadoop, NFS, or Amazon. We can also set up in the archiver.xml the location in Hadoop, the specific Hadoop directory where Shuttl will put the Splunk buckets. And the last thing we can do in archiver.xml is also select which Splunk format we want to use in the archive. For example, we can use just the regular Splunk buckets, we can use CSV files, or we can use the Splunk bucket but compressed using the zip. In the HDFS properties that file, we specify the location of the Hadoop name node. And in the indexes.conf, we specify the script that Splunk has to use to move data from the warm bucket to cold, or from the cold bucket to frozen. To find the latest configuration on these three files, please go into the GitHub repository. And with that, let's move to the demo. To start the demo, we're going to look at the Shuttl user interface. The main panel shows us the recent activity that happens through Shuttl, how many buckets we brought back in, as well as the ability to look at the subtab of the thaw and the flash subtabs, and we'll get to that in a second. The other elements of this demo is to show an application that's going to use this data. However, at this point, as we can see, the demo is empty. There is no data, there is no index data that the search can draw from. So the very first thing we have to do is to go into the Shuttl user interface, click on the thaw subtab. We can select the range in which we want to bring the data back from the archive into Splunk. So we're going to select 2006 as the starting point in which we will bring the data into Splunk, as well as from the archive into Splunk, as well as the end, which is going to be this year. And once we search for buckets in that time range, in those many years, the Shuttl application actually brings the potential buckets that we can then index into Splunk. And so once I click on the thaw bucket, Shuttl goes in, bring the data from the archive, and create those index data back into the Splunk for searching. And what we can see now, that if we go into the application and refresh the application, it will take us a few seconds, but Splunk then goes in and refresh its user interface and allows us to look at data dating back, as the index indicated, back to 2006. So we're looking at the total number of commits, user kind of panel, and the impact over time. We see that the data is actually coming way back from 2006, which is a fairly archive and historical data that Splunk can search on. The other elements of Shuttl, as we mentioned earlier, is the ability to flash the data. So what we can do with Shuttl is remove some of this data from the user interface. The data from this particular index, and let's have a little bit smaller of a subset. So take a look at data that ranging from 2009 to 2011 and search for buckets in that time range. And once we click on the flash these buckets, Splunk goes in and remove those buckets, and at that point we can go back to our application that actually uses that data, refresh that, and after Splunk goes in, searches for its time range, we can see that the range between those years that we selected to remove is no longer part of the search criteria for Splunk. So Shuttl, as we mentioned, has a function of bringing the data to Hadoop, Amazon, or NFS, then pull the data back from those archive systems into the Splunk Thod bucket, and finally the ability to actually remove some of these buckets from the Splunk search. And finally, to try Shuttl and to be able to download that, we have to go to Splunk Base. Splunk Base is a repository for all of Splunk applications where we can download the app, take a look at the quick start guide, actually gain access to the source code, as well as look at the latest and greatest information about the application. Thank you.